Production practice. Another of the meta options given to us related to focus on form are production practice. As the term production indicates, this is the kind of focus on form intervention used in teaching practices when the learners are encouraged to use a specific form of language. So that is, it takes place at the output stage. Output stage or the production stage is the stage of teaching where the learners are actually producing the language themselves. So it can be a task involving writing, or it can be a task involving speaking, which are productive activities. And within these tasks, we encourage the learners to use specific form of language. So production practice actually aims at exploiting a specific language form, and there are several ways in which the teachers can do it. Two of the ways are the teacher can actually elicit the use of a pre-selected item of a language that she has taught, and she gives a task in which somehow the learner has to use a specific language form. She can actually encourage the learners to use that specific form, or she can use a task which is communicatively designed, that has a sense of purpose, that has some sort of authenticity, and she allows the learner to use the language in a situation where the use of that form is most appropriate and is more close to authentic situations. And more often than not, after this production stage, or as a last part of this production stage, there is a meta talk. Meta talk is a talk about the task. So the teachers and the learners actually then engage in how they have used the form and to what effect it was being used. Now, what are the benefits of language production, especially with focus on form? And over here, let me remind you of Swain's output hypothesis, who argued that the learning of the language is best ensured when the learners are actually using the language. So through the output of the language, the learners learn the second language, and the hypothesis argues that this happens because the learners, once they are using a language productively, either in their writing or in their speaking, they become aware of their limitations. Because what arises is a need of a specific structure, a need for a specific way of saying things. And it is then that they realize that they do not have a specific vocabulary or the grammar to say what they want to. And then they start to look for it. It also argues the output hypothesis of Swain also argues that when the learners are forced to produce the language, then they are also forced to form a kind of a hypothesis about how a language works. For instance, if you have to say something, you will also say something because you're forced to say something. You have learned a little bit of the second language. You do not command the second language fully as yet, but then you have to form a hypothesis or have to form a kind of assumption about how the language works, and based on that assumption, you will be you will be using a specific form of language. So the hypothesis might be right or the hypothesis might be wrong. In any case, the production of the language allows you to test your own hypothesis. It allows this reflection in which you can, through which you can actually see the difference between your own production of language and the production of language by others. So you will realize, oh, this is how I said it, but I think I need to tweak it a little bit and say like he said it or she said it, the native speaker said it. So because that made a lot more sense to the third person standing there rather than the form of language that I used.